Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the offer, part 2 of Good Living. My name is Heather Ackroyd, artist of Ackroyd and Harvey and part of Culture Declares Emergency. And we'd like to warmly thank our hosts, Being Human Festival and Climate Museum UK, for the partnership and for this opportunity to have this really interesting conversation today. Just a little explanation around Culture Declares Emergency and the offer. The offer was launched by Culture Declares Emergency in April 2020, last year, in response to the lockdown, to allow artists and creatives to have a platform to share experiences and reflections during the pandemic. Culture Declares Emergency is a movement launched in 2019 that declares climate and ecological emergency. It is a response to the emerging critical times we face and what is emerging in them in solidarity, resistance, and through the power of culture to make change. It's a ground-up movement now with nearly 2,000 artists, collectives, organizations, and institutions, and is in the process of gathering, campaigning, and finding the way to journey into the future we face with creativity, imagination, radical hope, faith, and cultural humility, working for a future that sustains the planet and everyone, everywhere. CDE works in solidarity with people and movements, declaring the climate and ecological emergency globally to raise collective visibility and increase the urgency of our shared message. We welcome you and we invite you to join the movement. We are both nationally and internationally based, and we'll put details into the chat of where you can register. Very excited for Good Living, parts 1 and 2. This is part 2, bringing together artists, researchers, and activists, exploring the creative practice of Indigenous artists, honoring the value of Indigenous relationality in the time of ecological and climate crisis. The speakers will explore a sense of kinship that extends beyond human and individual relations to embrace more than human species of plants and other animals. So I'm just asking, if you are here, please can you mute so that we're not having background noise? Also to add that we are filming the session. So if you'd rather not be filmed, then keep your screen dark. The 2 sessions are exploring how the unlearning of our separation from nature can illuminate our experience and challenge Western binary and human-centric thought in a time of climate crisis. Our speakers today are Will Potter, Dr. Baiba Pruse, Dr. Nataliya Stryamets, Yulia Prakofjewa, Olga Belichenko, and they're part of the interdisciplinary biocultural diversity lab led by Professor Renata Soukand. And we're also joined by artist Mara Lea Hohn and Henrietta Baird. We have apologies from Delaine Le Bas, but she sent a message that when we are introducing Mara and she's introducing her practice, we'll play. Will Potter will speak first. He is in Australia, and 2 days ago, we had an early morning conversation with Will. He is such an exceptional young man. He's training as an architect, and he's an activist with SeedMob, Australia's first Indigenous youth-led climate network. We're building a movement of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander young people for climate justice, the Australian Youth Climate Coalition. Their vision is for a just and sustainable future with strong culture and communities powered by renewable energy. So I'll pass over to Jamie and he will play Will's film.
I'm Will. I'm joining you all from Wonnegaland in Australia, near Sydney. And I'm a Gunagara man, and I am an organiser with SeedMob, which is Australia's first and only Indigenous youth climate network. So what we do is we build a movement led by and for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander young people to continue to protect our country, culture and communities from the causes and impacts of climate change. And as we are young people, and especially young Indigenous people, we are feeling the effects of climate change first and worst. So SEED works with hundreds of volunteers across this continent, and I guess by extension I do, and it's really important to me to achieve our vision for First Nations-led climate solutions that build strong, resilient and sustainable communities. So while we are doing this work here in this country, it coincides with the work of lots of Indigenous peoples from all over the world. And I think that is really exciting. For us, mob in Australia, we've had this culture for 60,000 years. And a lot of what we're doing is fighting the continuing colonial practices of mining for coal, oil and gas on country, as well as the impacts of a warmer planet like the heat waves, fires, droughts and floods that are hurting our communities, and those colonial ways of land ownership that stop us from caring for country. So I've said country a lot, and what that means is, so country doesn't just mean land to us Indigenous mob in Australia. It means yes, the land, but also the water, the air, the rocks, the plants, the animals, the spirits, and the stories that all come along with that and all are shared. And country, so we were a rich tapestry of nations before colonialism in Australia, and country is often referred to by those nations, but country for us is something that's linked, and everything is connected in that way, and we are an equal part of that country to any of the other animals or plants or components, rivers. So part of what we do on climate is fighting for our ability to protect country. When we have our land rights and determination over our communities, we can protect our country, we can draw carbon back into the ground, and we can stop climate changes in our tracks. So for us, our biggest campaign is in the Northern Territory, which is a big area in Northern Australia. And something like 80% of that is covered in exploration licenses for oil and gas, which is one of the biggest gas basins in the world. It's called the Beetaloo Basin, and pretty much if it gets fracked, we aren't going to meet 1.5 degrees. Like, it's just not a reality because it's so massive. And pretty much what that means is our brothers and sisters in the Pacific Islands and in the Torres Strait, which the Torres Strait is a part of the country or the state Australia. It pretty much means they're underwater. So for a lot of our mob, they're fighting for not just their culture, but for their lives. And a lot of our continent, which is quite hot and quite dry and relies on groundwater, it will be unlivable, especially with fracking, which is a dangerous extractive process, whereby they put lots of chemicals into the ground, into the groundwater, sideways. They drill down and then sideways. If that sort of pollution gets out of this toxic industry, that is the groundwater gone for generations and generations. And water is life in the Northern Territory, and it's too risky for this sort of practice to happen. And a lot of mob say they were never consulted, and they, our nations deserve to be consulted time and time again. And when they say no, no means no. So our communities are on the front line of the fracking industry, but we're also organizing and we're building our power to say no to this toxic industry. So that's a lot of what SEED does, is support mob. We support our First Peoples on the front lines who are saying no to these industries. So our culture is very much tied to country and the land that we live on. We have an oral storytelling tradition that dates back 60,000 years. And this tradition tells stories and spirits that are linked to all the different parts of the land. For me, for my dreaming, which is the origin storytelling in Aboriginal cultures, dreaming, there's a story of a quoll, and it's being chasing the rainbow serpent, and that's what created our rivers and valleys and mountains, and some very special and sacred ponds on our country. And so these sort of stories tell of not just creation, but of a way of life and our way of life. And if you take away those places and our totems and the plants and animals that are essentially part of us culturally, then you take away part of us and us in general. So when our rivers are dammed and bushfires burn our sacred places and mining tears it from the ground, we lose that connection to our culture and ourselves and the spirits before us. So it's very important to who we are and to our cultural identity, that our sacred places are protected, that our groundwater, our air is protected, because we all share that, and by extension our climate is protected. This country is currently grappling with how to protect cultural heritage. So after some really incredible footage was shared of the Juukan Gorge in Western Australia being blown up by mining giant Rio Tinto, and having absolutely no repercussions for it. This is like a 20,000-year-old or 40,000-year-old cave with incredible value to its first peoples. Was just blown up with no regard for it. And the reality is that sort of thing is happening every day in Australia and not getting that coverage. Trees in Victoria called the Jabberong trees, they were cut down to widen a road or move a road, and there were months and months of protests by the local peoples. As far as I know, that's still going on. With COP, and I think like that's the elephant in the room that probably should be addressed, and something I did want to speak about. I think it was very disappointing. There's people whose lives and identities and cultures and islands can rely on the outcome of these sorts of things. And I think the words of India Logan Riley, a young Maori activist in New Zealand, said something that a lot of Indigenous people have been thinking, that in the face of mediocre leadership, Indigenous people shine through. And she invited everyone to learn our histories, listen to our stories, honor our knowledge, and get in line or get out of the way. And I think that is so important, a takeaway from what otherwise is disappointing, that as Indigenous people, we've been on the front lines for a long time, but we also have, tens of thousands of years of knowledge of how to care for our places. And we know how to lead, and we know how to lead sustainable societies. We have knowledge for that, so we can lead. And if you can't lead, let Indigenous people take the reins. Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much, Will. I really, really wish he was with us. He is remarkable, as you have heard. And if anybody would like to be able to access his recording and share it on any of their social media, through any of their communication channels, please get in touch, because this is about spreading and amplifying the work that they are doing. And, just the notes I made when he was saying, we know how to draw the carbon back into the land and stop climate change in its track. And, honor the history of Indigenous people, get in line or get out of the way. And I just think those words are incredibly significant and resonant. Can I please remind everybody to please to mute themselves? There is some background noise at the moment that's slightly disturbing the speakers. I'm really pleased now to invite some very wonderful academics who are based at Ca' Foscari in University of Venice. We have Dr. Baiba Pruse, Dr. Nataliya Stryamets, Yulia Prakofjewa, Olga Belichenko, and they're part of the Interdisciplinary Biocultural Diversity Lab led by Professor Renata Soukand. And the group works on local ecological knowledge on the borders of the former Soviet Union, studying the changes in the plant use of small ethnic and linguistic groups recently fractioned by the borders. The leader of the DIGE project, or maybe it's the DIG project, Professor Renata will introduce us to the project as well as the concept of ethnobotany. And the team will bring more insights on the aspects learned from the many community members visited. The research is financed by European Research Council Starting Grant. And with this, I hand over to Renata, and warm welcome, and we look forward to hearing you talk, Renata. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Heather. Good evening to everyone. And I really miss the possibility to meet Will in person online. It's really fascinating what he was talking about, but what we are going to speak about is also resonating very well with his talk, because indigenous people are not only outside Europe, they are still in Europe, regardless of colonization and regardless of everything. And it is related also to the fact that the people who work with the land, on the land, and also maybe not agricultural jobs, but just going around and observing the nature, are actually with time becoming indigenous, because they learn how to listen to the nature and how to attend it and live in kind of collaboration. So we cannot say that we protect the nature for the nature, but we protect it for humans, because nature can live without us very well. It's we whom we need to insert into the environment we live in. Next slide, please, Baiba. Thank you. And this is why we are speaking about ethnobotany, because ethnobotany is a very practical knowledge. Actually, it is a practice, because you cannot use a plant without actually doing something with it. And for that, you need to know how to recognize it, where to find it, how to prepare it, if we speak about such a simple thing as food, for example. And this knowledge is not static, it's changing. As the flora is changing, as our habits are changing, the way we approach the nature, and also the education we get, because this is all directing our ways of life. But it is very important to understand the dynamics of how this knowledge is given from one generation to another, or within one generation. And this have been influenced a lot by specific factors. And this is what my research team is studying. On example, next slide, please, of Baiba, next slide, of 4 different research sites inhabited by small ethnic groups and their neighbors. The trick in the study is that the ethnic groups have been divided, despite living together for a long time, divided by the borders recently, either about 75 or 30 years ago. And therefore, we can see the influence of different decisions, including political, which have been driven from different economic, social, or cultural perspectives. And we can evaluate, hopefully, in the future, how this kind of knowledge related to the nature, just as one example, can be future supported in order to maintain this kind of collaboration between human and nature, and human and non-human nature, maybe would be better to say. So I give the floor to my colleagues who will present to you different aspects of the research we are doing. And next speaker is Olga Belichenko. Olga, please.
Yes, thank you, Renata. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm very pleased to present today as a part of the international team. And I will present only this slide. It is based on my field work on the border of Russia and Estonia on the Russian side. I was studying the small Finno-Ugric community of Seto people. And one of the quite important part of the life of local community is the local market. And I would like to stress everyone's attention on the fact that local markets are in fact the most powerful source of the information about local plant use, about the local ethnobotany. And here I am going to show you why. So first of all, obviously, this is the place where people exchange goods. And the market that I was studying, located in Pechori, just on the border with Estonia, but located in Russia, is a place where not only enterprises of smaller scale can present their products, but also everyone who raises plants, who collects them, can obtain a license and to sell them there. So this is a place where everyone can come and exchange what they know about plants and bring what they get from the land. Starting from what they produce in the farms, but also ending by the things that they collect in the forests, like berries, mushrooms, herbs, sometimes even medicinal herbs. And as an example of goods, you can see Rumex and Rosa species sold in this market. Second important thing is the practices. So not only you buy these things there, you also can ask how to cook the things that you buy, how to preserve them, how they were collected and where, how they were cooked. And as an example is the summer soup prepared with the local type of fish, which is specialty of the region that I studied. The least visible probably is the microorganisms that people exchange via the dairy products, first of all, but also fermented foods. And you can see an example of the lacto-fermented mushrooms, which is also quite specific of the region. And the greatest thing is the ideas. And this is just the understanding of the plant sourcing and identification. And for example, if you're sick and you don't have money for pharmaceuticals or you don't want to intervene with them, you can ask how to treat this illness. Just coming at the market and ask people, I need this herb, or I'm sick with this. I want to know how to treat it. Or for example, as an idea of preparation of cucumbers, you can obtain there a set of aromatic herbs for the lacto-fermentation of cucumbers located next to this part in the bottom right. But what is not mentioned here in the slide is the fact that local markets are an important part of the local identity. If you belong to the community, but for some reason you're separated by the border and you use an opportunity to come to the local market on the festive day when the border is open or more welcoming, you come to the market and ask what is going on, what are the latest news, and exchange with them. You can buy the local foods that you used to eat in the childhood and ask the recipes if you forgot. So this is the powerful source of the belonging for the community, powerful source of the links and of the ties. So I just would like to finish with this and to open floor to the next presenter, Julia.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me? All good? Thank you.
All good.
Let me elaborate further on interconnections between local ecological knowledge and contemporary art crafts in the modern world. I was working on the borderland between Poland, Lithuania, and Belarus, and here, based on our field work findings, we can construct a conceptual framework that denotes the relationship between artists, between environmental space, local ecological knowledge, and society. We see clear lines of intersection in the form of the search for an image, the use of specific natural materials, the use of plants, and the choice of technology in local ecological knowledge and practices. Through observation of a craft artist, I sought to reveal local natural resource users' tacit and embodied knowledge about the use of plants. Skills, knowledge, and experience also encourage representing and reconfiguring of materials and products, leading to more sustainable consumption and less intensive resource use. But for an urbanized person, local ecological knowledge and modern crafts make it possible to join the tradition. Through numerous artistic works, the canon is popularized as well as the visualization of the national idea, explaining this by the fact that a massive need for solid markers of the national picture is growing in society. Thus, at the moment, an ethnobotanist, scientist acts like a mediator between the barriers of local ecological knowledge and artists, designers, and traditional artisans. And now I welcome my colleague, Dr. Nataliya Stryamets, to take the floor.
Thank you so much, Julia. Can you hear me properly?
Thank you. Yes.
Okay. So if by chance you will travel over the Western Ukraine in some holiday day, you would see nicely dressed people who are bringing extremely beautiful bouquets and wreaths and baskets with the fruits and going to church. So when we saw this beautiful picture, we were trying to understand why they are going to church and what are they doing. So our study was focusing on the two communities, one indigenous people of the Carpathian Mountains, Hutsuls, and one in the Rostoche area. We wanted to analyze the attitudes towards the rituals and interactions with the local environment. So when we interviewed local people and we studied how they use local environment and flowers in the rituals they perform in churches. So also we compared the data with the historical sources, and what we find out that with the colors that they use, in the past they were using, people were using more yellow and green flowers, but in the present times people are using more colorful palette. So they were using a lot of red and purple color. And then if you compare the taxa they were using, so in the past and compared to present times, people were using 18 common taxa with the historical times, and out of 11 holidays, 2 holidays were lost in times. But what is the most interesting for us as for the researcher is that during the Soviet times in both communities, it was totally forbidden to perform religious rituals and to bless those flowers in the churches. So after the Soviet Union collapsed, these rituals and the use of flowers were regrowing again. So these human nature interactions are really needed for the well-being of the locals. And where did they get those knowledge on the use of those flowers? So how to perform those holidays and what kind of flowers do they use for these beautiful bouquets? We identify the internal knowledge, so from the older generation, from the grandparents who are still alive and still remember how it was before the forbidden time, and then external, for example, from the churches or from the other region, from the Polish side, for example, in the Roztocze area, people were getting those knowledge. So we conclude that for the well-being of the locals, these interconnections with nature through the using of flowers are really important and are really artistic, because the bouquets and the rest are extremely beautiful. Thank you, and I'm giving the word to Dr. Baiba Pruse.
Thank you, and I already noticed the message of Jamie, so we don't have so much time. I'm going to bring just shortly that also we try or experimentally try to collaborate with artists and bringing these community stories into artworks. And as you see in the picture of the Caraway story, which is actually a sort of a collaborative work between food designers, history, food history, an anthropologist, and researchers of our group, which combines narrative where we do not want to imagine future where the cheese is without the caraway seeds. And so the artist produced one of the artworks, and actually we tried to combine this academic knowledge or this research studies into artworks, and bringing also even to the academic conferences in this style. And another aspect we are trying to experiment is sort of going out and working in the field with the people, just to combine, for example, poetry and workshop of herbarium making. So combining these two, and this again was a great success. And so we wanted to just show how engaging actually the people were back in Venice, where we did the herbarium workshop, bringing people to the plants. As I see the time is out, so I hope, Renata, you can still stay for the question part, and then we could answer the questions. Thank you to the whole group, and we stopped there, right?
Yeah, thank you so much for such a fantastic presentation. There are many artists here today, and I know there are many artists who are working with plant material and fungi as well. And so I think what you're showing in the academic work you're doing, the research, is really, really interesting. You may be getting some more interest coming your way as well, which is really good. But yes, please, if anybody would like to put questions into chat, then we can pick up on those after Henrietta has spoken. I would really like now to welcome Mara Lea Hohn and Delaine Le Bas, who has extended her apology. She can't be here today. Just to explain, Delaine Le Bas is a cross-disciplinary artist who creates installations, performances, photography, and films. And she was one of 16 artists who were part of Paradise Lost, the first Roma pavilion of the Venice Biennale in 2007. Mara Lea Hohn is an artist, performer, and mediator. And she was born the year in which the borders of the Iron Curtain were met by the Green Belt, a nature reserve along the death strip through Europe that became home to endangered species of birds and plants. In 2019, she founded the Nomadic Healing Wheel, a participatory healing garden based on ancestral knowledge with an intercultural community of gardeners in Bolzano in Italy. In 2020, during the pandemic, she founded Nomadic Seeds with artist Delaney, an online exchange platform about healing plants and communities that also became part of the Roma Biennale. And before I hand over to Mara, I just want to play this message from Delaney, and then Mara will be able to pick up and explain further.
I would like to apologise for not being able to be with you tonight. I would like you to look at the slides and read the words. They're words from the people themselves. Many people have lost their lives, and I would like to thank the people that I've been able to spend time with, and what they told me was, pass the message on.
Mara, I hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Heather. Like according to what Delaine was saying, I want to read now a manifesto, and later I will tell why I was reading it. But now I think this is very important. Can you see this text?
Yes. Yes, Mara.
Okay.
Mara.
To be a seed that is dispersed by the wind, to observe the bodies from high above, the debris, the waste. We travel through our thoughts. We carry messages of resistance and hope not to become insane, not to give in to terror. We have seen the fire, the violence. We have seen death. Youth that falls, that laughs, that yells, that shakes, rocked by the wind, woven together. Our lives exposed on a screen, edited images that present us as the problem, not as the result. Text messages, emergency calls asking for help, and containment requests. Piles of bodies dissolving on the damp ground, carried by the river, thrown away, planted in oblivion. Plants give us a lesson of resistance, of re-existence. They animate us to be. Dandelion. To be flexible, to alternate within the serrated leaves, and a flower that defeats the apparent immobility, to grow in the periphery and the city margins and amidst indifference. To be invisible and despised, to get up after the aggressive boot has crushed our body, everyone's body, to treasure seeds able to travel, arise and fly away. Frailation, to learn the lesson of stillness and of waiting, being soft, wealthy, growing slowly, emptying, allowing the water to go through the body, to nourish the earth, to be a witness of silence and learn from it. Years that go by, another scale for time in which we are just a blink, the moorland, before a glacier gives us overwhelming proof. We are scorned like the weeds, but we are witnesses, voices that spread throughout the networks, showing hope and betting for a better life, for a delicate and affectionate world. We are seed and fruit, subject to an individual and collective life, exposed to being fractured, but also to be united. We try to draw upon the wisdom that has always accompanied us. Suelda con suelda, comfrey, to unite what is broken. Calendula for inflammation. Gerba buena, and valeriana, to be able to sleep, to calm distress. Women's knowledge that comes from other times and that questions a misunderstood and belligerent masculinity, trap of the hero and the sacrifice that has been so costly for our country and for the world. We make a wake-up call for all the indifference and the cynicism of our governors. Remember, we are sown, a sown field, not better, not worse. From Uzma, from the silence of the moor, and in solidarity with our dead brothers and sisters, we ask you to be seeds and messages to be spread by the wind. Manifesto plans of protest. Jaime Barragan from Uzma in Bogota, Colombia, with Nomadic Seeds for planting resistance in May 2021. So what I was reading now was part of an intervention we were doing in May because of the protests happening in Colombia and the Eurocentric ignorance accompanying it, or better, the media that was not, transparent to what was happening. I started a collaboration with the Mesa Usmeka in 2020. This is a community that is supporting indigenous groups in Bogota, in Usme, which is a part of Bogota, and an old cemetery of the Muisca, which was an indigenous community. And now there are living many farmers who got displaced by monocultural agriculture, by intensive agriculture, and also by the growing of coca. They had to move from their lands, they had to leave their lands, and now are part of living in this landscape of the old Muisca cemetery. And so in these days, Colombia is facing a very severe problem still. And this, we might now think, oh, this is not affecting us, but this is not true. We are the ones who caused these problems by our consumption, we cause it, by our consumption of fruits and vegetables that are grown there, but not only, but also by our consume of cocaine, for example, which we are in Europe the #1 consumers, and also of our whole colonial economy. So there was also a need arising that people who were not heard in their own country, because media was obviously oppressing their voices and shutting off the internet for a night, for example, when there were massive police riots and killings of people. We wanted to create a platform of hope. We wanted to plant a kind of resistance with an action to give voice to people who were not able to speak in their own countries, and also to give them a voice as a little small attempt to give them a voice in Europe. And so we had this planting resistance, where also we were writing before together with Jaime this manifesto, which was from the children perspective. It was written from the perspective of the kids of the future, the kids standing on the ruins of their ancestors, on the dead bodies of their ancestors, and shouting, "Hey, we are here, but nobody's there to help us to save our ground." And so we invited different protesters, but also we made an intervention. You can see here, wait, sorry, which was actually a planting resistance. And this was actually an online event. All participants were able to plant a seed in the name of a dead protester. We were naming the names of the people who were killed by the government, and then planting their names into a pot and also a seed or a plant to plant memory, to plant awareness, and also to plant hope. And this was also accompanied by an action of the MFA program in Weimar, who also made a performance on an old landfill in Weimar, which became a biotope. It was an old GDR landfill, which was contaminated and now is natured somehow. I don't know if the word is right. And they were planting the Sanguine plant, which is the plant for healing wounds. It's an old healing plant for healing inner and outer wounds. And as a symbolic act, they were also planting this. And after this this event, we made another. I hope I'm still in time, but I will make it short. we were also making another performance in Graz with the Indigenous Rights Collective in July. So, and this was this happening was called Fermentation Resistance, which was sorry. Which was addressing a problem do you see this? I don't know if you
yeah, we can see it, Mara.
Okay, the whole picture. Okay.
At the moment, we had the whole picture before. Now you've gone back to, we've got your words, we've got your files.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, now we've got the whole picture.
The whole picture, perfect.
Well, just about, yeah.
So yeah, it was, we were, there is an action, it's called the Paca di Gestora. It's in practice, a community practice from Bogota, where people take their own organic waste, bring it together, and in a kind of ritual, they perform building a paca, a mobile kind of garden. It's also a form of compost. They sing together, they exchange news about their communities together, about their neighborhoods, but most of all, they empower against the government by that, because over 50% of organic waste are landing on landfills in Colombia. Colombia is one of the most biodiverse countries in the world, and contributing to our climate conditions. So it's a very important country in the world. And by this destruction of, by this loss of organic matter, which is more and more contaminated with other waste, there's also a contamination of the groundwater, biodiversity is vanishing, etc., etc. So people want to create their own soil. This is a kind of empowerment action. And we did this together, linked with a procession for ancestral future in Graz, together with...
Mara, we're only seeing a section of the image. Can you actually see if you can make it bigger? I thought it was going bigger, but...
This is strange, actually. So I will wait. Don't know what's happening here. Sorry.
Don't you worry, it's fine.
I think I will just open this document which I was sending to you. Maybe this is easier. So, okay, sorry. Okay, I think this works. So, and yeah.
That's okay, that's good. We can see that.
Now you see. Thank you. Yeah, we started a procession through the whole city, and which was also accompanied by a Sikuri group, which is Peruvian indigenous music, which was forbidden by Spanish governments once after the colonial times, during the colonial times in Peru, and was a kind of revolutionary or protest, a music of protest. So as the Enrico collective from Graz is also linked to a music group, we were connecting this as well. And we started a procession through the whole city. And we invited people before to donate us their organic waste and to take part in this community action. Here you see you see some people of the Sikuri group dancing in the paca. The paca is layered by 50% of organic waste, which is also animal dung, or like your organic waste from your kitchen, which can also consist of bones, for example, from from animals you had eaten before, for example. But not only, it also consists of all organic waste you can find outside. So and you layer it as a kind of lasagna, and gradually it ferments after some days. But more beautiful is the action behind it, that you create a piece of ground, a piece of common ground together by doing that. Because gradually, how to say, a cube is coming into existence while you're creating it. And so a piece of land is created where you can directly plant plants on. It's a kind of mobile garden you create by that. And so though this utopia of creating common land together was the motivation behind. And we started doing this activity not only on one place, but we performed it on other places as well. So gradually little islands throughout the city were coming into existence. And we planted them with different healing plants from the people and their ancestrals, based on their ancestral knowledge. So yeah, that was. Thank you. Sorry for so long.
That's really, it was really enjoyable to hear you talk about your work, Mara. And I like these ideas of this common land, these islands being created over the town, and this kind of collective action. I think it's really, really powerful. And please put, if anybody has any questions to ask of Mara and her work, please put them into the chat and we can address those in a short while. So yeah, thanks again, Mara. So we're now going to see a film. It's a recording of Henrietta Baird speaking. Henrietta is a dance and installation artist, a botanist and a herbalist from New South Wales in Australia.
So we are on Gadigal country. We are in New South Wales and there are 29 clans, yeah?
And I'm on Wongal land, which is one of the 29 clans as well in the Eora Nation. And correct me if I'm wrong, Henrietta, but that's the Hawkesbury River to the north, the Nepean River to the west, the Georges River to the south, and the ocean are the boundaries of the Eora Nation.
Yes.
But neither of us are from this country. I was born in London.
Oh, yeah.
And where are you from?
I'm from the rainforest, rainforest and saltwater people, Gukuyalanji. My grandmother's from the Yirinji, which is the Atherton Tablelands. Yeah, which is far north Queensland. So it's along the coast, along the rainforest. I don't know if you heard of the Daintree rainforest, but it's they just said that they gave some land back, all of that rainforest area back, which is really important to our people. And hopefully, you know, our mob will look after country or have the chance to look after country now. Yeah.
That's fantastic.
So firstly, I trained in dance for 4 years. 4 years, yeah, I trained in dance. And then I moved straight into teaching. I didn't know any plants from down this way, but it took me ages. So I started to work at, I got a job at the Royal Botanic Gardens, which is based in the city. And little did I know, because back in the day, they never really taught you history, really. And the actual site where I was working, Clarence, who's like a mentor, Clarence Lucky, he was like, oh, you know, this is the site of actual first contact where Aboriginal people met the first fleet. And I was like, no ways. So I was, again, learning my own history as soon as I left my dance training. I stayed there for 10 years, learning about plants from the New South Wales area, learning about the history of the New South Wales people, but also teaching them our history, you know, teaching them the plants. And then because I was still dancing for different choreographers, I thought, what if I use this information and then turn it into choreography? But how can I make it interesting by, you know, getting people to think about, you know, what plants are important for medicine, what plants are important for eating, you know, what plants are important, or how we extract poison, or, you know, different medicinal properties.
Yeah, so Etta, with Plant a Promise, the idea that everyone's going to plant a seedling and then put it in the installation and then take it home. What is it that you want them to experience through doing that? And do you think that's building to something bigger?
Yes, I do. I think we all unite together as one. We place it in the art installation to create a bushland, take the plant home. They can all plant it in their backyard as a promise, but also as a, I don't know what the word is, a responsibility, yeah, that they're going to change their habits. But I would like for elders to, if we were to do this in different communities, you get to hear different stories from the elders, yeah? So each community is different, each community has their own story, but maybe when we do the planting, the plant is different. It's plants from their specific area. So if we were to do this overseas in UK or, you know, Canada, those plants would be different as well. And imagine those stories coming from their elders, you know? So I think this could potentially grow and be amazing. We just got to get, you know, people on board, or maybe just one leader to lead the work, you know, or to lead that planting activity. Yeah. And think about the plants that are important. Say for instance, if I was to do this back home, we have black palms, and often black palms are used for weaving, and they make their dilly bags, which are really, really quite beautiful and unique. And because you need to use like the palm tree, it actually takes the whole, like the whole tree, yeah, or the core of the tree. Once you take the core, the tree is dead. So every, you know, 5 years, there's a sister of mine. She said to me that what they do is they go back out to different bushland and they plant that black palm, so that even though they're taking the material, they're putting back into the country what is being taken. So yeah, think about the plants that you have in those different areas and plant the important ones. Yeah, I think it was two years ago, I decided to go into learning land management, and they were talking about how after a bushfire, you can't just go and walk anywhere you want through the scrubland. You really got to be careful, you know, like tread softly, because you don't know what plants you're stopping from growing, like popping up. So that was really important too. And I thought, well, there's not only the plants that need to strive, but, you know, we've got our animals, so they're important too. And if you look at the ecosystem, like everything, there's a symbiotic relationship within, like, I think a lot of things, yeah? So some plants need plants, animals need animals, people need plants, vice versa. So we're all like united together. And if we don't take care of it, how is that going to happen when we're only thinking about, you know, what we want, not what we can give.
The stories, or the because it's not always just stories, but there is a responsibility from one country to another, and so you have to talk to your elders, don't you, in order to get permissions. Do you want to talk just as much as you can? I know some of it you can't talk about, but some of it, just to explain a little bit what that is.
Yeah, so I think when I'm looking at my work, I'm always asking, you know, who's the right person to talk to, and why their voice is important. And you kind of have to follow those cultural protocols, because sometimes, you know, I think when you're asking such a big question, everybody has their own opinions, but making sure that you go back to the elders from your own country, but also from the country that you're living on. So you give them a chance to be a part of the work, so that you're showing that respect. Yeah. Just getting them to, getting them to engage with us, so that, you know, their voice becomes more bigger, more important. And yeah, it needs to be in there. Yeah.
We've done 1 week's development on this plant, a promise work, and we were supposed to go to country, and we couldn't. So maybe can you just talk about what you did, what you had to ask your elders to do?
So because we couldn't go, I then gave him an option, which my mum's sister said, yep, I'm willing to do that. And she took it upon herself to go into country and talk about the landscape, which was pretty amazing. And then I thought, well, this is what we're missing out on, which is really quite sad, but, you know, maybe next time we can go there.
I hope so.
Yeah.
It'd be amazing to go there.
Borders should be open very soon.
When I spoke to, do you know Tyson Yonka Porter? Have you heard of him, Etta? He wrote
Another last name?
Yeah, okay. You know the last name?
Yeah.
He's from I don't know where. Yeah, and he wrote a book called Sand Talk, which is amazing book. And I asked him once what you could do, and I'm just sharing it now because I think it's like anyone in the world could take this up. And it's just like wherever you are, just make sure you're looking after it and that you know it really well. And that just struck me as such a great way of thinking about, because, you know, a lot of people like us are living in countries that where we weren't, not where we were born, not where our ancestors are. And so, and in Australia, because like so many people's ancestors are overseas, and like we cling to the coast and look out to the places far away where our ancestors are, but we have to look after this place, you know. So I think there's something, yeah.
It's important that you brought that up, because that's why I had Dean Walsh on board, because he would tell me the story of him for years, like just going down to the beach and picking up all this rubbish. And then because he was, you know, collecting all of the rubbish from the beach, I thought, I want to go and see him, because I want to know what his process was, you know. How did he feel doing that? Was it just important for him to do it just for the sake of it, or was he, you know, was there a meaning behind it? So I think that's why when I wanted to talk to him and ask him to be a mentor, you know, one of his, because of his work, thinking about sea animals, you know, and how microplastics are always found in the sea, and because his work was being underneath the water and imitating different animals, that's why it was important to him. And I thought, wow, well, my perspective is going to come from a plant perspective, you know? So there's lots of stories connected to plants. And, you know, I think depending on where you come from, you are connected, like that plant or that animal could be your brother or sister. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but we have totems, yeah? Totems can be given to you by a family member, your elders. This is them seeing what your spirit is like. So they might give you, your totem might be a kangaroo, your totem might be the moon, or it could be a plant. So those totems, they have their own story, and it's your job to learn about it. It's your job to protect it, etc. If it's an animal, you can't eat it, yeah? So and each clan group or each tribal group, they have their own totem, which you'll see, sometimes you'll see from their makeup, their body makeup or their paintings. So they might, you know, paint something that represents an animal or might represent a plant, yeah, so it's really important, depending on where you come from, that you are, you know, those stories and what those stories mean to you in your tribal group. Yeah. I don't have a totem, but my sons do. One is the full moon. Another one is the sea eagle. And the last one, he is the evening star. So yeah, they've all been given tribal names and totems. Yeah.
Thank you. So yeah, that was Pippa Bailey, who is based over in Sydney as well, Wangara Land, as she was saying, and she's been really active with Culture Declares Emergency. She's doing a lot of work with Indigenous people, and yeah, so it would be really good to have a Q&A, well, just to talk. The book was called Sand Talk, yeah, Sand Talk by Tyson Yunkaporta, and it's really very, very, very interesting, and certainly well worth reading. So are there any immediate questions from everybody gathered here? Chat. Okay, so we've got a question for Baiba from Baiba. Question for you: could you talk about the artists that you work with and what their creativity is around plants?
Thanks a lot. And yeah, we are happy that in the team of Renata we have Johanna, and she's drawing, and she's also yeah, hand drawing things. And well, basically this is sort of mutual interest. She's interested in nature and environmental, let's say, crisis, if you want to name it like this. But she's bringing the story very nicely, in a sense, like you saw also the maps of the locations from the project, and these were also drawn by her, and she gives a certain touch and a certain feeling, yeah, through her work. I don't even know how to explain it. It just clicked very, very nicely of the way she feels the touch of the project as well. So I'm just checking what Jamie particularly read in the respect of the question, what their creatives around plants. Yeah. So, well, it's actually a mutual collaboration. So also this work with the caraway story, and it was a discussion of the various uses for the caraway, and then we thought about how to visually make it possible. And then with the team, we decided, well, this could be the cheese, as it's also widely used practice at the Baltic states to use the caraway seeds for the cheese making. So I'm not sure, Jamie, if I answered your question, but these are some pitch patches. So it's definitely a great experience to work with artists, and it's not the only project we have done.
Thank you. There's a question for Mara from Caroline, and she would like to ask about the Packer Gardens. How long do you work with the people? Do you keep visiting? And she's interested in the process of making and using the gardens, the kind of sustainability.
Thank you for the question. Yeah, there are different projects. I'm working currently with 3 different gardens in 3 different countries. So yeah, the one you were seeing, and the one with the Packer, located in Graz in Austria, I'm working still with them, and they also send me the documentation about the gardens, what is happening, and we will continue the work there also next year during for the week of Indigenous Resistance. But I'm also, I did not show you the pictures, but I also founded, together with a group of female migrants in Bolzano, I founded a garden with whom I'm also collaborating and producing this soil together. And I'm now moved, I was living in Italy. I had been living till September there. Now I moved back to Germany. So, but I'm there every 2 months, so to see how it is going. And now I'm collaborating with a garden in Berlin with a group of Syrian refugees, female Syrian refugees.
What is the work you're doing there? Could you just talk about that a little bit more, Mara? Is it sort of early stage?
Yeah, I did not show you now, but maybe I can.
We should make Jamie. Can Mara co-host again?
There is indigenous practice I have studied in the last years, which are the medicine wheel gardens, and I tried to find a way of reinventing them together with people in a new way, so that they. Mostly I work with people who have a migrational history, and they bring in the knowledge of their own cultures, of their ancestors, inside a certain kind of medicinal wheel, which is a healing garden that is separated among 4 healing properties, not just the physical ones we know in our Western cultures, but also spiritually, first spiritually, emotionally, physically, and also mentally. And this is responding also to 4 stages of life, to 4 stages for the 4 seasons, as well as everything. So yeah, and I'm inventing one garden, one healing garden in Berlin now with this Syrian refugee group, female refugee group, according to their traumatic experiences they had while being oppressed under the regime of Assad, and then now having a diasporic past and arriving in Germany now without being welcome. And we now create a healing wheel on wheels. So it will be a mobile garden where we will make a kind of protest through the whole city of Berlin. So that is planned. So you see, this has a shape of 6 meters. It's like a diameter of 6 meters. And it's located in a garden, in a community garden in Bolzano, in an intercultural community garden. I developed this garden as a reaction to COVID-19 in 2020, as there were many female migrants from Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, who were not feeling represented in the Italian health system. And so I was gathering with them and inventing a shape and a system where we could grow their plants together. We were also creating the soil on our own after indigenous principles to make black soil. And yeah, there's a whole process behind that, but yeah, here you see a part of it. And just the last thing, it's a bit like a donut, as you see. When you enter this, you are a bit more on the ground, like you're more deeper than the plants are. The plants are higher than you are. And this is also inspired by a teaching of a Mamo, in indigenous Mamo we were advised by, who was saying a garden needs to be, or you need to be closer to your ancestors and closer to the past when you want to grow things, that you are aware of the history of each creature and also your own, that you are also part of this whole circle of life. This, yeah.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing. I wanted to ask, yeah, if there's any more questions, please put them into chat. Renata, how long is your, when did you initiate this, do you call it DiGe? And how long is that going to continue for, this particular?
Well, DiGe started, one moment. Kid was watching TV. DiGe started 4 years ago, a bit more than 4 years ago, and it ends in January 2023.
2023.
Yes.
Yeah. Will you try and continue it, or is it this is the kind of the research period?
Well, I work on local ecological knowledge, so I will continue with that, and I think also my team members will continue working on that, and among other things, raising awareness of the importance of local ecological knowledge, and as it's something which supports us through. You can have plants, you can even preserve the biodiversity, but if you don't know how to use them, what to do with them, there is no chance for humanity to survive. And the knowledge about the use of plants have been accumulated through many years, generations, thousands of years, and it's about to go with few generations. So actually what we are documenting now in Eastern Europe is kind of at the edge of extinction, because the countryside is emptying. The people are still there, but the people are old. So we need to find a way for young people to go back to countryside and to continue the lifestyle, maybe not that harsh, but still fingers in the earth, because this is what creates a connection. And Mara gave us a very beautiful picture of a garden, which is an example of the practice.
I just wonder, actually, have you come across Fairwild, Renata, or anybody in your team? It's working for a fair deal for people of wild plants, but they're transforming the trade in wild plants to enable transformation of resource management and business practices to be ecologically, socially, and economically sustainable through the supply chain of wild collected products. This includes plants, fungi, and lichen wild resources. They do some really fantastic work as well. You may well be aware of them. I was just wondering.
Well, it depends on the region. Nataliya can talk more about this because she has studied the use of mushrooms also for income, or collecting of mushroom for income. We are more in general concentrated on the practice as such and its transmission, not from the economic perspective, but Nataliya can tell more.
No, I understand. I was just wondering if there was just a kind of an awareness. No, I've put a link into chat, and I'm sure they'd be very interested in your research as well. I mean, they are more of, they're an organization called Fairwild, and they're based in Cambridge, but they work across the world. They definitely work in places like Georgia and Bulgaria and more Eastern European, but they're trying to stop the illegal trade of wild plants to ensure that wild plant collectors, who are some of the most socially, economically depressed and, you know, constrained, that they are, you know, that they have proper income, but also that the practice of wild collecting is done in a very sustainable and sensitive way. And for example, there are certain products such as Neil's Yard in this country that works with Fairwild projects, you know, so, and we've seen through work in Kenya, we've seen that chain, and we've seen the really positive impacts it has on people's lives. And this is to do with collection of frankincense. But yeah, I was just wondering if you're aware of the organization.
Yeah, thank you so much for this this insight. And yeah, it would be very good if it would work in Ukraine, because, for example, there is a red listed species called Arnica montana, which is heavily used by pharmacies, and it's forbidden to collect it in the wild, but people are still doing it because of the income they are getting for selling those plants. So it's very, very good that there are such organizations that are taking care about this important thing. So thank you.
Yeah, actually, Nastia, who runs the program, is Ukrainian. So actually, but please put in chat the name of the plant, actually, and we can bring that up. So we have a question. What did the team from Venice think of the Australian First Nation artist talking about plants being a brother or sister to do with the relationality? If anybody there would like to pick that up, either.
Well,
Renata.
I think it's very cultural dependent and also cultivated maybe from the education in current Europe. But I just bring example from Estonian culture. Plants as animals are addressed with the same pronouns as humans. So we say about plants he and she. So, but we don't have he and she, we have just one gender, gender neutral approach in Estonian language. So this should explain, I think, this. So they are equal to us on the cultural perspective. But it depends on the language, I think, deeply also. So this mentality is established by language and culture. So for me, this is normal, like normality. But I know that in many cultures it's not. Or maybe someone else wants to comment.
Anybody else to comment? We have, if not, then we have a question, but from Susan. But I'm thinking, if this was directed, can you speak more, please, about choreography and dancing and having the perspective of a plant? But I think that was to Henrietta, to Henrietta, and she's not with us, sadly, at the moment. But hopefully we can organize another event next year at a time that is sort of like friendly, not, you know, to the 12 hours difference. But we can ask her that. Actually, yes, we will ask her that, and we can feedback, actually. We can find, if you can just sort of perhaps put your email into chat or send it to Jamie, he can get that back to you, actually, Susan, if you're still with us. And Veronica's saying how fascinating how many people have been talking about transmission of knowledge between generations. Is this something we are losing in urban context, for example, or through more transient societies or divided families? And I think that, yeah, it possibly, I don't know if there's any thoughts on that, if anybody would like to just talk to that, or if Veronica would.
If I may.
Yeah.
When I spoke with my Italian colleagues, then for them, all the knowledge is coming or the source of knowledge are the grandparents. What relates to this kind of ecological knowledge. But Nataliya here can also bring an example. But for people with a Soviet background, where grandparents rarely had time, parents never had time, and also people were moving from cities to cities, and also did not have just time to spend with children to go around. So this division between generations appeared much earlier than here in Italy, in the West. And the source of the knowledge became book. And the book can be very misleading source of knowledge, because it's easy to make mistakes when you have never encountered the plant and then you take the book and try to recognize it. It's like you go with a photo searching for the person, and if there is a similar person, you can just misinterpret the information you are getting from the picture. So this could be an analogy.
Yeah, I think certainly the power of oral storytelling is just something that goes deep, particularly the story that's repeated, and as you say, through a grandparent or through an elder. You know, to be taken outside on the walks and told the story of the trees or the plants is something that stays with you for life. Books are great, but you know, at the same time, you have to keep going back to restudy, it's a different relationship with the written word to hearing somebody telling you a story. So maybe there is a need to really reanimate and revitalize the spoken word within our cultures and communities as well.
I think it's not that much about the story as such. It's about the practice. So you have to touch, you have to smell this plant in order to recognize it. You have to know how to cut it, how to peel it, how to boil it, how to preserve it over the winter. Well, this applies for northern countries, but in UK you also have winter. So you need to preserve plants over the year, over the half of year at least. So it's about the practice, about this specific work done with the plants, which is important here.
Well, it's really good to have that clarification. And you know, as you say, it's sort of, as you say, cutting the plant, smelling the you know, the aromas that it gives off, and preparing it. Yeah, I think that is really, really important as well, and telling the stories at the same time. But no, that's really helpful. So we have come to the end of our time together, and I just want to really very, very warmly and to thank all of our speakers today. It's been a real pleasure to meet you and to hear about your research, your practice, your art, your resistance, and your loves and your passions, and everything that we need going forward. And we look forward to staying in touch with you. And there will be a continuation of this discussion and of this dialogue. And please do keep in touch with us. And if anybody would like to join Culture Declares Emergency, please do. You can just go to culturedeclares.org, I think it is. Is that right? culturedeclares.org.uk. And you can reach us. I think it's that one anyway, you'll find us. And very warm thanks to the Being Human Festival and the UK Climate Museum UK as well. To Jamie Jackson for doing the 2 recordings and editing the recordings with Will and with Henrietta, and to Pippa Bailey for bringing the wonderful work of Henrietta to our knowledge as well, or to our attention as well. And, you know, this always, it's just really, really somehow life affirming, plant affirming. And I thank you all, and have a very good weekend.